Hello. Today I'm talking with Sander Hoogendoorn. We talked about being a coder at heart, different approaches to learn to play music, and agile.
I'm Ivanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it.
Hello everyone, and hello with me I have Sander. Is that how I should pronounce the name?
Yep.
And with me I say here, but let's bring also on screen. Where I am and where you are. So I'm in Ghent in Belgium. Actually, it's already showing on your location in Amsterdam, this location, and I'm in Ghent in Belgium. So that's not that far away. And we're recording this on Wednesday evening at a little bit after 8 o'clock. Both on both sides, I would say, in Belgium and the Netherlands, we're in the same time zone, so that's rather easy. So welcome. And before we jump into the questions, maybe a small introduction. What do you want people to know for the few people that don't know you? What do you want people to know about you?
I'll try to do it briefly, which is hard enough. So I'm an old guy, right? I turned 58 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, actually, which means I'm nearing 60. I have been writing code since 1978. So I am a programmer at heart. I still write code every day. Actually, I was writing code with my team the whole day, apart from some meetings that I usually try to avoid. Um, I have three kids from one of my previous relationships. They're all grown-ups. They all went into different directions, but all with a passion. That's probably what we share in our family. Yeah, I live in Amsterdam. As a programmer, I live in the Java Street in Amsterdam, so that's good. There's not a better name to live in, right? Not a better street to live in. I write code a lot. I started doing agile because this is about agile, right? In the mid '90s, actually, when we started doing an agile approach in the late '90s, Jurgen Appelo started as a young developer on my team. So I'm that old, and so I've been doing that for a very long time. I used to be Capgemini's global agile thought leader for a bit until I quit working for large companies in 2015 and I went freelance. And as a freelance, I do mostly CTO roles, what I did before that as well. But currently, I'm the CTO for an e-commerce company called iBoot, which is also here in Amsterdam. So I cycle to work most of the days. What do I do next? Well, I've written some books. I wrote tons and tons of articles in magazines. I do speak a lot at conferences, so a lot of people know me from conferences. I actually had my first talk yesterday in Belgium, actually. So I was at the Karel de Grote, let's call it Applied University of Applied Science, I probably should call it, to enlighten the students about how I think about writing code. And that was really nice to do. That's in a nutshell. Yeah.
Like you say, a big nutshell, because this is of course a big life. There's a lot of
Yes.
things that you've done, a lot of things that you've been, and I think both of us we run into each other from time to time, since a long time, I would say. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you. So thanks for joining, I would say.
Yeah. You're
Let's
welcome.
let's jump into that very first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
Yeah. I thought about that question, and I think there's of course a lot of events and life events and that change you and alter you and probably improve you, hopefully. I think that um, the biggest one for me was when I in 2008, 2009, oh, my laptop goes into screen saving mode. Oh, did I go or was I still here?
You were
Because
still here. You were still
oh,
here,
good.
indeed.
Because the screensaver kicked in actually. I'm not 100%
Okay.
sure how to switch it off actually. Wait, let me. Anyway, so my life was too busy, right? I had a busy international job at Capgemini. I had a relationship that wasn't in the best state, and it broke up later. I had 3 kids, and we were building a big house, and all that together. And I ran into a terrible burnout. Right, I literally couldn't move my legs anymore at some point in time. I was so incredibly tired, and so I had to change things. And in that period, Capgemini appointed me a coach, which was a really interesting character, actually here in Amsterdam. And he started asking me questions that I didn't really understand at that point in time, like, "Why are you with your current partner?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? I've been with her for 20 years." And he said, "Yeah, okay, so but why?" And he started asking me the question why, and that over time, so long, cutting a long story short, learned me that actually there's not enough time in life to do everything that you were supposed to do. So there's always shortage in time. So you need to make trade-offs, right? You need to choose basically. So I started identifying what for me was the most relevant, the most important in my life, and at that point in time, it wasn't that relationship. It also was not working for a large consultancy doing international stuff. It was looking after my kids, making sure that they grew up happily, trying to figure out what happiness means to me, right? Trying to figure out what is relevant for me. And that were some of my friends. It was writing code. It was traveling. And later on, a relationship I started in, and it sort of changed my whole perspective on how I do stuff. And that means that ever since that point, I got better in making choices in what I think is important and relevant and what I really like to do, and what my passion goes out to, instead of just doing everything that comes onto you. So I started eliminating lots of stuff from my life, making my life a lot more simple. Um, by the way, it's not very simple right now because my relationship just broke off last week. So I'm a bit in a mess now, but we'll see where that goes. And but it's made my life very simple, and it makes my life into, okay, these are the things that I want to spend attention on, and there are a lot of things that I do not want to spend my time on because I don't have that time. And when you grow older, that awareness becomes actually bigger and bigger, and it becomes a much bigger part of your life, saying, okay, listen, I don't have the patience to be in stupid meetings the whole day, so I'm not going to. This is what I want to do. I want to write code with my team. I want to see that my team is happy. I want to see that my relationship, well, I have that now, but and that and that my kids are happy, and that I can give them the stuff that I want to give them. And so I travel a lot, and I for instance, try to well, not make, but try to show my kids what traveling is all about. So I took them all over the world, and that has made them into travelers as well, basically. But they have other passions as well, passions that they grew up on their own. The most important was that I could give them the fact that there's a thing called passion, that you can follow that. So one of my kids, for instance, became a drummer. He got really passionate about drumming, and he studied drumming, and he's now a professional drummer. And that's amazing, right? And my youngest son, he's just starting, well, he's in his second year of psychology here in Amsterdam, and he definitely found his passion in that, and it's great to see that. Right, so it's like my life's about the passion for the things I do, basically. And that's I learned that from that starting point, that burnout, where I couldn't do anything anymore. And yeah, it's been quite a
Um,
journey since then.
yeah, it there's all kind of things going to my head. But I recognize the passion in a lot of what you do, in a lot of what you talk or write about. um well, of course, the thinking back at a certain age. I don't have the same age, but I'm also I'm 53, so just a couple of years behind you. But it's indeed the same kind of thing where, okay, I know that there is probably more life past than life in front of me. I doubt I will become 106 or yeah, 116 like you. If we
Probably
would
not.
double it. Although I think I read this week somewhere that people who were born in the 80s or 90s could become, there's a lot of chance that we will grow older than 100.
Wow.
Unfortunately, we're a little bit older than that, but still the chances are more for our generation than for other generations. But still, I think, well, like you say, there's a big past behind us and there is less time, and we need to keep thinking about that. And that puts a lot of things in perspective. Like you say, my children are not graduated yet, but two of them
Hmm.
are also studying, and that means indeed that there is, yeah, that's a second, a next generation, and thinking, what did we give, what did we learn our kids, and did they, can they follow their passion? Do they see that there is the passion? Um, was that something that you thought about before you went into the burnout? Because I think you were already a passionate person at that moment, but
Oh yeah, I
what?
was. I was for sure. Yeah, true. But no, so the passion was always there. But I got so I had this big international job where a lot of people wanted a lot of stuff from me in different places, and I actually never said no because I thought, okay, this is my job and this is how I should do it, and people want stuff from me, so I reply. So one of the things that one of the managers I had at that point in time, he said, well, just teach yourself this simple trick that don't always reply immediately, because what happens if you reply immediately is that as a pattern, people start to recognize that you reply immediately. So in the end, they'll be disappointed if you don't reply immediately. So when you don't have the time to reply immediately, they're immediately disappointed. So stop doing that. Wait a day or something, right? Or just say, okay, I'm on it and I'll get back to you, or whatever, stuff like that. It's just simple things. And it also, so the main question that my team and I usually ask when we are doing stuff is the question is, do we really need this now? Does it make sense to do the things that we're doing? Do they add value actually now? Um, and that's in writing software, it's essential, right? Because a lot of people write software and make sure that, yeah, over 10 years it needs to be doing this, and in 3 years time we will be able to do this with it. And doesn't matter, 3 years time down the road, you have no idea what's going to happen 3 years later, right? So you can set out like a dot on the horizon. So where do I want to be, where I want to be with a company where I work for, where I want to be in my relationship, where I want to be with my kids in 3 to 5 years time. But that's it, right? All the details, you can only fill them in very brief in front of you. Typically what agile would teach you, by the way. But so I just basically made my life agile in the good sense, right? So not agile in agile with a capital A and branded and whatever, but it's like what it always was for, right?
At the same time, how should I say it? The fact that we're working in sprints, like very quick iteration sprints, whatever we call them, very,
Mm.
very. I think there is also a big risk for people to go into burnout, to keep like delivering time after time. So I see a lot of passionate people that have that risk in a combination with
Yeah.
agile. Is that something you recognize, or?
Yes, and that's why we don't do sprints.
Mm.
It's the problem with these sprints. I stopped doing sprints a long time ago, like um,
Mhm.
probably around 12 years ago. And the main reason for it is that sprints are like mini projects, right? It's like you set out, giving some arbitrary estimation that nobody knows how to do. That, oh yeah, we're going to do this work in this period, which means this period becomes a stressful period of trying to get all that work done. That never works, by the way. I rarely see people doing sprints that they actually make the sprint. So there's always the pressure of finishing stuff that you can never finish, either because it got more complicated, it's sidetracked, it estimates are wrong, or well, estimates are never wrong, of course, but um, um, you don't know how to estimate the work. So sprints put a lot of stress on people, actually, because they are mini projects with a deadline. Name it a deadline or not, it is a deadline, right? So what I did a long time ago is I removed that whole idea of doing sprints from how we work, meaning there is no 2 week project. There is no estimate at the start of this 2 week or 3 week period. that we try to figure out all this work that we could fit in and that never fits. So that means if you go into a mode where you don't have that, where you just say, okay, this is the next piece of work that we're going to try, and then evaluate that with whoever owns it, and say, okay, is this the most important stuff that we can spend our time on now? And if that's the case, we'll pick it up and we'll make it as small as possible. So it's stuff that we can deliver very frequently in very short iterations, not a fixed area, but just work basically. So we went into a modus of just doing work, right? And that gives a very different set of constraints to how you spend your time, because there are basically no constraints to how we spend our time. So what am I currently? I'm currently rewriting our UI framework to make it actually much faster and much more, much less resource consuming, basically, because it's the stuff we see that happens. Took me a week or two to do this over the holidays and afterward, and now we're moving it back in, and that's just something I just started to pick up. Somebody else is doing another project that I thought I switched off my screensaver. I just don't know how to do this, and they're just pieces of work, and everybody's onto something, and people on my team can pick out for themselves what the next piece of work is that they're working on. They can also do it in whatever time they think they need. However, the question is always, do we really need this now? So we make a minimal version of what we can deliver to our customer, basically the internal organization, and our 2.3 million customers, right? So, and that gives a very different. It doesn't give that amount of pressure that sprints put onto teams. And stopping doing sprints is a good thing.
Yeah, I recognize the risk that there is. On keep working, and like I said, yeah.
For some reason, and this is basically why I move away from all of these agile and scrum communities and whatever you might have, because they are so hung up on the fact that you need to do some ceremonies, and otherwise you're not doing it well, and if you're not doing it well, then you don't have whatever, right? And it so much annoys me that these people there, where the Agile Manifesto says we are uncovering better ways of writing software, right? It doesn't say you need to do sprints and otherwise you'll fail. That's not what it says. And if you discover that something that people think you should do because somebody wrote that down in a booklet 25 years ago, and that's still a good idea, then you have missed the point, basically. And that is what I see in these agile communities. They miss the point, and they're about implementing a set of stupid rules and ceremonies mostly. And that's sad, actually. It's not what it ever was for. So I moved away from all the agile communities. I rarely ever speak at agile events anymore. I stopped doing that a long time ago. The only exception I had was quite coincidental, is that I did a talk at Scrum Day Europe a couple of weeks ago, which was, everybody was like, "What? You're on a Scrum event?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not sure how I got here, but it's that was an interesting." But actually, so I told a story similar to this one, and they actually appreciated it, at least. If it's changing their way they do their work, I don't know, but I could give it a try at least. That's also something I learned over time, I guess. It's like I lost, in that period of time that I had the burnout, and after it, I lost all the decorum. I lost all the necessity for dogmatism, right? I used to be a very strict no, you have to do it like this, and I totally lost that, because there's hundreds of different ways of doing stuff, whatever you're doing, right? To give you an example, right? So my middle son, when he started drumming, he took lessons, and that helped a lot. And then he did an education before he went on to musical university. Yeah, we call it conservatorium. It's in Belgium the same, but I'm not pretty sure what it's in English the right word for it. But and he did it using lessons. My other son, also when he was about 15, 16, he picked up the guitar, and he never took a single lesson. And so he basically learned how to play guitar and bass from the internet. which is a very different way of doing stuff. Both lead to a very good musicians, right? And he's a very good guitarist now, but he never had any lessons. But he's still quite good. So there's always different approaches that you can take, and none of them is actually necessarily the better one. So Scrum is not necessarily the better approach to doing stuff. In contrary, it's quite often not the best way for doing stuff. But yeah, that's my opinion, right? And if everybody else has other opinions, that's fine too. It's like I'm not basically judging the fact that people do Scrum if it works for them. What I am against is that people do Scrum because they think it's the way that you have to do stuff. And there's a lot of people, like a lot of Scrum masters, especially a lot of people who have no affection with the IT field whatsoever when they came in, seem to get stuck on the procedures and not so much on what's the thought about it, what's the reason behind doing these things, and how can you improve even by demolishing that framework in 16 pages that somebody wrote down.
I recognize the people who have learned it in a specific way, that are then kind of policing others. You have to do it this
Yes.
or that way.
Oh,
It's
I hate that.
and the conservatorium, I think that's the word in English.
Oh yeah.
Conservatory, sorry. That's indeed a place where I've seen the same thing, that they say this is the only way to learn it, and that's again not true. It's a good way, and it's a certain way that works really well for a certain kind of people for certain things. But it also had disadvantages because you learn to do it, and then I've know a couple of professional musicians that say, I'm actually sometimes sad because it's harder to just follow feelings and whatever, because I have so much baggage, which is really good because I can use it in many ways. But sometimes if I just want to jam with people, I will I'll work with people who are play very strange notes that I'm taught not to combine, but it works. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even dare to try because I've learned that it's not a good combination. But yeah, sometimes things just work and without there is a reason. And then I think your two sons, what you explain is very nice. Two different approaches, and
Yeah.
again, both have their advantages.
And so the drumming son, he started when he was like 15, 16. My third one, my daughter, my oldest, she's also a musician. So she plays the piano and she sings. She's a singer-songwriter, basically. She doesn't do much with it these days, unfortunately, but she started very young, right? She started learning, taking piano lessons when she was 5, 6 years old, and then switched into songwriting a couple of years later. She is actually a very good singer. She had like a more classical approach to it. So they all have different approaches. So my middle son, who's the drummer, he went from nothing to like everything, but still following lessons. And my daughter went like this basically, right? And yeah, so there's different approaches, and it's the same with writing software, right? I'm not going to say that the way my team works is the best way, because there is no best way, but it is for us the best way. So what I usually say is there are no best practices. There's only good practices given a certain context. And in the context my team works in is it's a context where we threw overboard almost everything that everybody came up with in the agile communities. And there's very little left of what people consider agile. Is it still agile? Yes, very likely. Well, very actually. But does it look like any of the approaches out there? Nope, nothing at all, actually. There's also a lot of people that say, "Oh, you don't do Scrum, so you do Kanban." No, we don't do Kanban either. It's not either this or that. There's like 50 shades of gray in this, and probably 500 shades of gray in this. And the way we work is probably unique. I don't see it a lot actually in other, but there's no actually. It's a set of techniques that we sort of combine, and that works for us, and that's good, and that's good enough, right? It doesn't have to work for everybody. I don't care about that anymore. I used to, but
You've grown.
exactly, that's the point, right? Yeah.
And yeah, the by the book, I regularly, well, these days a little bit less, but for a very long time I got questions about, oh, could you help us? We want to do agile by the book. And by definition, I always ask, like, I point at the picture of these books behind me, and it's like, which book do you mean? Because I've
Yeah,
like 50, 60, whatever, maybe 100 books on agile. They're all different because they're written by a person with different experiences, and that worked for them. And so you basically, with your company, you've now written your own book, and probably every month you have to rewrite it because you're
we
learning
do
new
actually.
things.
Yeah, we do all the time. Actually, I had a conversation with the management team earlier this afternoon about changing the way of working slightly because in this particular case, the marketing department is not um, well, they're not extremely well organized. They're a bunch of creative people, right? They don't do well in like more projecty like situation, right? And that's, but we build stuff for them, and we want to do that in really short iterations, like delivering it out to the clients, to the customers in 3 days or whatever, right? And but that does mean that they need to stay involved and they need to agree with each other. We're actually starting to build something now tomorrow again for the fifth time, I think, that they just redesigned five times. Um, and then first one of the content director designed it, and then we built it, and then the marketing director didn't agree, and then he made a new design, and then we got back and we built that one again, and now the CEO doesn't agree with that design, so they're now actually building today a new design, which we'll start on building tomorrow. We have built this stuff now five times, and it's slowing us down tremendously. So I'm actually wanting to change the way that we work with them slightly, in the sense that I said, well, I need to have somebody who has mandate to do stuff, right? And you might say, yeah, you call it a product owner. We do call it a product owner, but it's somebody from the business. It's not a particular role that somebody has. And then I said, well, okay, they need to reply to us within 2 hours, right? If we have a question, we need an answer within 2 hours. Otherwise, it slows us down. That's waste. And so we sort of now are agreeing upon that. So we're adapting it again to the current situation. And that's actually something you do all the time, because whenever somebody, so they're going to have a new person on board in the marketing team, of which they hope that she's going to bring slightly more structure to that team, right? And it will help us and everybody else to improve on how we build stuff for marketing. The other departments, we don't have any issues with it because they're fine with how we do stuff. So it's that constant adaptation to what you do. By the way, I actually started writing a book about this stuff, about what we do. And I started writing that like 2.5 years ago. And I'd written a full manuscript. And after it was done, I took it to some publishers, and one of them actually liked it, and the other one was not so sure about it because agile books don't sell well. And I said, well, it's not an agile book. And we got into all sorts of discussions. Eventually, when I got to the point that it was supposed to be published, I should have rewritten it, because the way we work already had changed, and it continues to change. So I actually stopped writing. So it's like a manuscript somewhere in a drawer or on my laptop that I haven't touched in like 2 years, because, well, it changed. And if I would have to write it now, I would have to start all over again, which I'm not going to, because I'm too lazy to do that, actually. It's like, I probably should, but I've written a bunch of books already, and I'm not sure that I'm actually wanting to spend so much time on writing a book. Uh, I thought I was,
Well,
but I realized recently that I don't want to do it again. Probably.
and like you say, the even if you rewrite it, by the time it's published, it's already outdated,
Yeah,
and then people
it's
think, hey, this is what Sander tells us to do. No, this is the old Sander that told us or written it.
exactly.
And yeah, that's yeah.
It's a bit, yeah, it's a bit like the Spotify model, right? They wrote it down at some point because it was solving the problems they had at that time. I think in 2014, I think, or something, or maybe earlier even. I don't know. And and by the time people got a hold of it, it was already, they didn't do that, actually. They never worked that way that it was described, actually. And because they
Yeah,
moved on, right? Situation changed.
Henrik once told me that by the time it got published, the videos and everything,
Yeah,
it was already outdated.
yeah.
And if I remember correctly, it was also partially created to also spread it internally to say, hey, this is a couple of ways or how we work. This is good
Well,
for everybody. And
Yeah.
one of the better ways to spread it internally is to publish it externally. Then people internally will learn about it and
Yeah,
learn.
yeah.
Yeah. So
So they
so
wrote it
yeah.
because it solved a particular problem they had. So they had like this exponential growth at that point in time. They grew very rapidly in the amount of people, meaning spreading your culture becomes hard. That's why it's all like intertwined and all these layers on top and things going that way and things going that way. And but the thing is, right? In the Netherlands, a bunch of banks started adopting it like 5 6 years ago, and like yeah, we're implementing the Spotify model. So now I have guilds and tribes and shit and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but this model is not meant for a bank. You don't have exponential growth, right? It's not intended to solve the problems you have. So why are you doing this? And they did, and they I think they already moved out of it again. So it's like banks have no idea, and banks are much better suited with stuff that works for them. They're large, they're slow, they're sluggish, they have lots of regulations. So this is not for them, right? So I talked to a large international bank about 2 months ago about not doing pull requests, and they totally. I said we don't do pull requests, and they totally didn't agree. They said no, you have to do pull requests. I said why? And they said, well, we work with 30 teams on our mobile app, and we can only release it every 2 weeks, or even deploy it every 2 weeks, whatever they did, or even well, whatever they did. And I'm like, yeah, but okay, I see that that's something that would work for you, but that doesn't mean everybody needs to do pull requests. We don't. My team is not big enough to do pull requests. It slows us down, right? It doesn't add value, so we don't do it. We do trunk based development.
It's very nice that indeed you talk about, hey, you need to do what you need to do.
Yes,
If you have lots of regulations, that's different than if you're a small startup and
it's a
want to
different
move
world.
very
Yeah,
fast. Exactly.
yeah.
Let's move to that because we've been talking already for a very long time. It's just the
Oh,
first question. I
oh yeah.
love it already. No problem, but we need to also make sure that we are not spending it for 5 hours. Let's move to that second one. If you had not been doing what you've been doing now,
Yes.
do you have any idea what would have become of you?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So the story I usually tell when people ask me this is that my youngest son, when he was I think about 8 or something, he asked me, Dad, if you would not have been a programmer, what would you do? And the answer I gave him, I would learn how to write code as fast as I could. I don't mean writing fast code, but learning it as fast as I could. And learning to write code, right, is I explained that to the students yesterday in Antwerp. I said, well, this is not something you learn and you thrive on for the rest of your life. You're going to have to learn for the rest of your life. There's no way out of this. Otherwise, you need to do something else. But in software, there's no way that you can stop learning because you'll outdate within like I think the what do you call it, the degradation time on uranium and stuff like that. In software, it's about 3 years. In 3 years' time, half of your knowledge will be outdated. That doesn't mean, by the way, that all that experience that you gain over time that it's not useful. But so when I explain my journey as a programmer, it's like I started to write code in '78. It was really simple code, and then like in the early '90s, I started learning about object orientation and started, oh, this is the thing that solves my problems. And then we got into design patterns, and then I started working for large organizations with stupidly big architectures. And at some point, when I left the large consultancies in 2015, I went down the hill again. I went from writing this fully 13-layer Java stupidly complex architecture into saying let's just throw everything overboard that I don't need. And if I look at the way that I write code now, it's actually still going down. It's still simplifying stuff. My code churn on our repositories is negative actually. So I remove more code than I add. For instance, I'm rewriting our UI framework now, and I think I lost about probably 35% of all the code that was in there, and it actually became way more efficient too. So it's but I couldn't have done that half a year ago because the techniques that I'm now using to do that, I didn't know those half a year ago, and that's the ultimate beauty of software and having a passion for that of writing code is that it never stops and you always get better even after 45 years of doing this shit. And I'm still a better programmer now than I was 6 months ago, and that's incredible. what other, well, it goes in most situations, I suppose, but this industry is by far the most rapidly changing industry there is, right? And I can't help it, right? There's always code running in the back of my head. It's always there. Even now in a conversation, or even when I'm on stage presenting, there's always code that I'm thinking about somewhere in this little spot, somewhere in the back of my head, and I can't stop it. It's always there.
Basically, your answer is whenever there will always be code involved, so there was not something else you could have become. It's
Nope,
and I think
nope.
your life is a real nice example of that because yeah, you again, like you said in the introduction, you still write code. I do remember many of the conversation like yeah, but it's part of your DNA, I would say.
Yes, it is. It's
It's
who I am.
it
Yeah. And it's
and
nice, right? If I do talks at so I frequently do like opening keynotes whenever developers need to be motivated, and conference organizers recognize that, and they put me on a stage, and everybody's like afterwards it's like it's a wave of passion that rolls over you, right? So people say that, and it's like it's always nice. I got so many nice responses from the talk I did in Antwerp. Lots of these students said, "Oh, this is awesomely inspiring and stuff," and it's what you can do as an old guy, right? You can say, "Listen, this is the best industry to be in, and never do anything else because this is the best fun you can have." So yeah,
you want to stress out that the fun you have and that's indeed as well we are now examples for other people and hope to
yeah,
inspire people, especially in these days where people discuss about AI, will it take over and whatever. It's good to have people like you saying like, hey, but still is fun, it still brings other kind of values that is completely different.
I get these questions
um
all the time, right? So is AI going to take our jobs? Nope, it's not. It's at best, if it well, if it lives up to the promise that they think it has, and that's the problem with the internet, right? If you go on LinkedIn or whatever social media, it's like, yeah, they now say it's going to do this and it's going to do that, and it's going to do that, and most of these things that people shout out on the internet and that get retweeted and relinked and with it, whatever, they're not based on anything, right? I use this stuff every day. It's not good enough. It helps for sure, right? I love working with AI, and I do it all the time, literally all the time. It's always on my laptop, but it's not good enough. It can't solve problems of the type of complexity that we have. Not yet, right? Will it? I don't know. But still, still, ever since I've been in this industry, and that's a really long time, we added more layers of abstraction to. We're not writing assembly code anymore, right? We're not punching cards anymore. Or there's been layers of abstractions on top of that that help us, the people who solve the problems, to do it in a slightly more efficient way, right? So when languages like Java and C Sharp came out 25 years ago, and JavaScript, and all of the other languages, by the way, right? It was a layer of abstraction that we added on top, so we didn't have to write C++ anymore, or C or COBOL, right? So we got used to adding, and then modeling techniques came along, etc., etc. But there's always higher levels of abstraction, and AI is going to be just that. It's going to be another level of abstraction, another tool in our toolbox to use. And but still there needs to be problem solved, right? That means that when AI is going to deliver on its promises, we as humans can take up the next level on top of that, which is going to be a higher level than it is now, and hopefully we solve real problems like I don't know, pollution or climate change, and hopefully by then everybody believes it's actually real, stuff like that. But it's we're going to be able to solve bigger problems, and that's what this industry is all about, right? um, um, Getting better at solving even bigger problems.
really like that you stress that because it's yeah, we've our tools have been evolving all the time. Even though Java, like you say, and C Sharp are like 20 years old, still they have improved, they have grown. And it's not the same kind of thing that my father used to develop in. which was the languages before. I still had to learn, and probably you at school as well, the assembler and other kind of things. I'm really happy I never had to program in this, and probably at school these days they don't teach it anymore. But that's because we evolved and we moved on, and other
Yeah,
tools will help us in these kind of things. But the problem stays understanding what the customer wants and create something with that in whatever way.
exactly, exactly.
And that kind of brings me to that next question. What is for you your biggest challenge at this moment? And why is it a good thing for you?
Literally the biggest challenge at the moment is that my girlfriend and I broke up a week and a half ago, and is trying to figure out how to deal with that, and whether it's repairable, and if so, how, and if not, what am I going to do? Because this is basically the point that I wanted to grow, the person I wanted to grow old with. But that's basically beside the point of this talk, right? So I think that for me, the biggest problem now is, um, how do I get the so I'm the CTO for iBoot. iBoot is an e-commerce company, but it's in Belgium as well, right? But it's and in a bunch of other countries, and we have been on the move ever since I got here, and we pulled out of the swamp basically, and we're now actually profitable, and that's really cool, and we want to take the next step. So for me, the biggest challenge there in that role is, um, trying to figure out with the management team, and I'm part of that. What's our strategy? Where do we want to be in 3 to 5 years time? How do we get there? What would we put on the roadmap for that? And then mapping that onto my team, and then making sure that my team and I are enabled to actually make that happen. That's in a nutshell what I do, and that's a continuing puzzle of bringing together people from different departments in the business, getting the management team to align, getting the marketing team to work with us, and making sure the people on my team are enabled and autonomous to be able to do the topics that they want to do. So I don't call them tickets, I don't call them projects, it's topics, but somewhere in between, right? So and they all seem to be happy. I haven't lost anybody from my team in 2.5 years, and even so, this is the fifth year that I'm in the company, and I've lost some people when we started doing this because I changed everything, and there were some people that were going from my team because I knew they would be going when we started. Actually, we've only lost one person or two people since actually, and both because they got offered jobs that paid a lot better, not because they wanted to go. But so I've kept my team complete for this very long time, and it's a team that is, um, it's very collaborative with each other. It's actually great working with this team. I love this team actually. So it's, and that whole puzzle, the iBoot puzzle, is something that, this is actually,
Challenge.
I've never been this long with a single company. And
Hmm.
maybe that's also because I'm growing older and I can actually oversee a whole bunch of this stuff. And there's still lots of stuff that I learn, right? I wasn't really an entrepreneur actually. So I work with these, in the management team with these entrepreneurs, and they're really good at stuff that I'm like, huh? Do we also need to think about this? I still don't know exactly what the difference is between Abbott and EBITDA and stuff like that, right? And they're really good at what they do, and it's really fun to watch. Although we get in big clashes as well, but it's like, it's a good team. I love them.
I guess, well, again, you're building, there is some challenge on, again, for you something new, because staying longer in a company is has its different kind of challenges, how to
Yes,
stay
it does.
interested, how to, yeah, how a lot of their things, um and that again, is where that passion and that drive is bumping up,
Yeah,
bringing us
and yeah,
immediately to that next question. We already talked a little bit about it, but do you know where that originally drive for creating code, for all that passion that you have that led to your burnout, where that originally came from? Do you know where that came from?
I don't know, but I've had. So I started writing code at a young age, right? So by now kids can actually start it when they're 5 or 6, right? Because it's available. when I grew up, that wasn't the case, right? The first thing I programmed was my dad programmable pocket calculator, which I still have, by the way. It still works. It's cool. It's 50 years old almost. 50, 22, 20, yeah, for like 47 years now. And it still works. I also still have my first computer, which was a Commodore 64. It also still works. That's also about 42, 43 years old. And I started writing code on that, and I loved it actually. And then I realized that that was the direction to study, and so I never regretted it. So it's always been there. It's probably because my mind likes to occupy itself with, let's call it puzzles. It's more than that, but it's puzzles, and it's creative. As I used to draw a lot. Um, some of my kids do it as well, but I have this creative thing that I need to get out, um, and programming is a highly creative well, art. Let's call it an art, right? Whether it's a craft or an art, that's always the discussion, right? But it is about creating beauty, and I can't let go of code until it reaches this intuitive sense of it has beauty. If I would show you the code that I wrote today compared to the code it was before, it's has a different. Um, the essence is different, right? It looks different. It feels different. And that's what I do. I create beauty from less beautiful code or from no code. That could also be the case. And as always, you can always find the better solution, right? It never ends, actually. It's like, so even the code I wrote. So I wrote this UI framework mostly myself over the past, well, maybe 3 to 5 years, because we used it also in the previous company. And I just recently got this new idea, which refined the whole thing. So I need to almost rewrite everything into a slightly different structure, and that was it's creating beauty. That's it. It's elegance. It's creative. Other people paint. I would love to paint more. I used to do it when I was younger, when I was like in my adolescence. I painted, and I had this idea of this is the style that I want to evolve into, and that will probably evolve too. But I wasn't good enough in it actually, and so it sort of stopped. It's the same with playing guitar. I can play it a little, but I don't have the passion for it as I have for programming. So I do it not enough. Right? There's a guitar here in my living room, but I hardly use it. And so my other guitars are actually my son uses them mostly, so it's fine. But
I recognize also what you say about the code. I think it was Ron Jeffries who said it one time. Is like when I write less good code, when I don't clean up, when I don't refactor and stuff like that, the next day I see it. And he compared it, if I remember correctly, like it's like if you cook and you're in the kitchen and you don't clean it up, everybody the next day will recognize, oh, when they come into your kitchen, like you didn't clean up. And once you're used to having a clean kitchen or you're used to having nice code, you recognize immediately, like, hey, this is good crafted code. Again, our styles might different, but we recognize it. Just like everybody notices, like, okay, when you cooked, okay, you did clean up or not. And again, our cleaning style might be different. Like for some people, it means everything in the closets and completely hidden. Others might have an open kitchen with everything visible. Again, that's a different kind of style, but you recognize immediately when it's cleaned up or rated at the craft. I really liked when Ron compared it in that way, because it's a metaphor that is very understandable for people that don't understand what good code is about. It's once you know it, well, and again, you will know yourself if you look at your code tomorrow, like, well, maybe yesterday I didn't have a good day, something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, or even like the code I wrote a year ago. If you still appreciate highly the code you wrote a year ago, you haven't learned, right? So that's and I never. If I look at my own code, I'm like, why did I write it that way? Because and that means, oh wait, I learned, and that's good. Um, there was something else I wanted to add, but no, I forgot. Doesn't matter.
let's move to that next question, which is a very interesting question to ask to people who are a little bit older. What do you consider your biggest achievements? And you already talked a little bit about your books, that for you it might be not so. So, what is for you a big achievement? And maybe before, what I've noticed also with lots of people, let me interrupt before you jump in.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
The A lot of people, basically, this is, I ask you to brag and to be really proud. Is that easy for you, Sander,
Yeah,
to
oh yeah.
brag?
Oh, I'm not very modest, so that's good. So no, so I did a lot of stuff in this industry. Some of the ideas were highly appreciated. Others maybe less. To be quite honest, um, I would say there's a few achievements that I count as really good. Is um, I have three kids who grew up to be um, appreciative, smart, intelligent, sensitive, um, passionate people, and that's my biggest achievement. There's no other answer to that. I think the second achievement, and I don't think that needs to be underestimated, is I am fairly good at being happy. Not at this point in time. I'm actually quite miserable at this point in time, but normally, um, I'm actually quite happy, and that's I think that's an achievement as such. There's a lot of people for a lot of different reasons who um, never experience that, right? And uh, I can enjoy things in life. Just like when I wake up tomorrow, I live in the Java Street, which is a really lively, nice, multicultural street in the eastern part of the Amsterdam city center. And I get up and I walk onto the street. I go to my bicycle, and I'm like, oh, such a cool street, right? And that's just it puts a smile on your face. It's like happiness, and that is um, something I strive for. But this is not a bad this is not a very good day because of personal reasons, but it's normally I can and be quite happy, and that's an achievement, I think. And all the books I've written, all the talks I've done, all the keynotes I've done, all the travel, maybe that I've seen quite a bit of the world, and I want to see more of the world. And I've seen so many beautiful and great and amazing things and amazing people around the world, and that's probably another achievement, right? So it's like I've been in lots and lots of places, and that never bores either. So that's always good. But it's not about having written books, or I don't care. It's not important to me now.
What I noticed there is, for me, I see a lot of links in that. It's like, okay, you created your children as in a worldview where you think like, hey, this is what I really like on the way they look into the world. That's also about happiness, I guess, in a way, about being happy in who you are. The
It's about
fact that
finding
you
their own passion. It's like
exactly. and
figure
and
out
but
what you.
and I
Yeah,
want to add as well the fact that you're able to say, like, okay, I'm in a miserable part of my life because of what just happened a couple of days, and probably the last weeks before that happened. But still, you can see that you're in general a very happy person, and that you enjoy life.
I
If you
do.
can, in that, I would say, dark moments of your life, in a way, it's not the happiest part. If you can still see that, that for me is a nice example of, hey, I can see that there are parts. Of course, it helps to be older and to look at multiple parts. I do
It does.
remember, yeah, I'm still happy in my relationship, and everything. Well, not everything. Like in every relationship, there is ups and downs. But I can imagine that it's different to have such a feeling of losing a relationship after that feels different than the very first moment, that the very first relationship that you lose. It's different because it's the first time. On the other hand, if you have already built up a life, there is also a lot of negative feelings about that. But still, I also hear that you could appreciate the life that you had with that person in that whole period.
Oh yeah, very much. Yeah, yeah. We were so yeah. That this is a bit of personal, but we were highly. um, uh, in sync with each other, right? We had a lot of things that just went really, really well, and but yeah, still then stuff can break, right? And
Yeah,
yeah,
it's well, again, I don't want to force you to go too much
no, no,
into
no,
the
don't
details.
worry.
That's but first of all, I really appreciate the openness that you are. But I think it's also a good message for everybody. Like, appreciate the things you have, and we
Yes,
in Dutch there is a book that I really loved that was called Liefde is a werkwoord, so love is a verb. And I
yeah.
think it's something I really believe in every relationship, even if it's friendship or whatever. It's actually a lot of work to keep it going. It's whatever we do, it's not because it went well for 20 years that it still is going to go well. You can
Uh,
just say, okay, I'm not going to invest anymore. That just doesn't work. And sometimes we're aligned, and sometimes we're no longer aligned, and maybe that's okay
so
as
I
well.
think this relationship, which lasted for 9 years, and I actually hope we're going to be able to figure it out. But I think the single sentence summary to it is we are extremely um, compatible, even in the stuff that doesn't work.
Hmm.
So we both tend to stack up the stuff that we small irritations to get big irritations, and we both tend to do that a lot. And at some point when you do that, you sort of like you lose the sensitiveness and the um, well, basically the distance becomes a little bit bigger, and at some point, yeah, it can break. And and again, I still hope we can salvage it, but if not, it's been the best period of my life, basically. So
It's a possibility, with or without help, but that indeed you can look and see, like, okay, we
yeah,
can we can talk at and we can figure stuff out. It's yeah, it's I've been talking more openly about it. That I think somewhere since Corona we started doing a kind of retro every week. I can't call it a retro with my
I
partner because
wish we've
it's
done that. This is exactly the point that we were like, why haven't we done this before? Given the personalities we have, um, why haven't we installed something like this? And because we are both very much aware of how feedback loops work, and that if you don't have them, stuff breaks. And we both couldn't find out why we didn't do it. It's because I think I know why we didn't do it. It's because we were on this silver cloud or whatever you call it, that we would well, that this relationship would be infinite, right? And then and you get sort of like um, and then you don't see it anymore. Like and this, building a retro into your relationship is a really good thing. Does it work for you?
I think it does work for us. We still need to look at it. And again, I wanted to say, I can't call it retro because everything that is work
Oh yeah,
related, my
okay,
partner says like,
yeah,
oh, and
yeah.
again, it's something that was kind of advised by other people to us, like, hey, maybe you should try this.
Yeah.
And I've know a couple of people who've done that, but done real retros because they were both into the agile world. And for me it's like looking find a way. And again, we need to look at what's the right moment, but it actually works. We do a lot of things these days, like, okay, also every day. Well, actually, since the end of last year, we're still struggling because my both me and my partner we switched jobs, so we're still looking on how does the time schedule figure out. But we last year we did on a daily basis also kind of a stand up, but more like, okay, well, how was your day
It's
today?
this
What are
is
you going to do tomorrow? It's stupid, but it works on so
No,
many
it's not. It's not.
levels.
It's very much not stupid. Actually, it's very smart. Actually, because this is literally the thing that I regret not having done in this relationship. Because otherwise, we would not have been at the point that we are now, and that's really sad. Actually,
Mhm. But it again, it needed to have some triggers by other people, other conversations that indeed tell us like, hey, maybe that's a smart way to do,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then for
no,
both of
yeah,
us to learn it. This is why I'm more and more open talking about it, because I think like, hey, it did a good thing, because well to well corona had put a lot of stress on a lot of people, and when we were all in lockdown, and I'll speak for myself, I consciously decided I'll make my bubble smaller, because I want the limitations that Belgium had, I want my children to use as much of that to see their friends, because it's more important for them. I can
hmm,
look more longer term. But that actually put a lot of constraints on, or stress on my relation, or our
yeah,
relationship.
yeah,
And so we really had to work hard after that, and saying like, hey, wait a minute, now that that time is over, we need to work again and find ways to okay, what does it actually mean to connect, and what do we need? And then we found, thanks to external help, we find, yeah, ways to, okay, what is working for us, and that really helped us to bumpy rides. And again, I don't think we were at the negative part of breaking up, but enough to say like, hey, this is not what
yeah,
it
yeah.
used to be.
And
So
that's
so
we should have done it, and I didn't recognize it too soon enough that we needed to go into, let's say, feedback loop mode. And because I don't like the word the whole thing, why I didn't do it is because I don't like the word retro. I don't like this whole retrospective idea, actually. So, and that's what probably have kept me a lot from installing it in our relationship, because I should have found a better word for it, like, and a different strategy. But it's yeah.
well, we don't really have a word for it. We just,
No, it doesn't
yeah,
have to
it's
have a
like
word,
that.
right? It doesn't have to have a name. But people, the
Mhm.
problem with retro is it's so much connected to this bad thing called Scrum that it has a
Mm.
negative connotation in my mind, and that's probably one of the reasons why I didn't start doing implementing a pattern like this, even though it doesn't have to be called retro, right? So
I
yeah,
do recognize that, if yeah, it's somehow, if something is negative in our head, it's very tempting to then
yeah,
discard everything else. Where again, like you said, there are good and there are bad things in everything. That's so, yeah. Let's move to the next thing. And okay, we talked a little bit about some agile things that can work in relationships. So I'm looking for an agile tip. Is there anything that does work for you? What you would
oh
advise
yeah,
people?
yeah. So in my mind, agile is just one thing: is uncovering better ways of working. That's it. Everything else, I don't care, right? Yes, there's good practices in mostly in XP. Basically, if you look at the technique, like we do unit testing, TBD, we do TDD, we do well, not all the time, but frequently, and we have unit tests for everything. We do have our continuous integration pipelines. We do have our pipelines running all the way up to production. So there's full continuous deployment mode, and that's the practices, but that's the technical practices. Other than that, all the stupid ceremonies and the roles and whatever stuff is called, I don't give a shit. Basically, the only thing that matters is, can you do the things you do better today or tomorrow than you do them today, right? And that's about learning. It's a continuous learning journey. And I don't care about retros and sprints and t-shirt sizing and sprint planning and all that other stupid mumbo jumbo that they put in there. And it's not restricted to Scrum, right? There's a lot of different techniques that people have installed that other people say, yeah, you have to do this and this. No, you don't. So in the early days of Agile, I invented sort of like an extension to the use case modeling technique, which we called smart use cases. It got quite popular, and we used it a lot. We used it a lot. We still use the ideas actually, but and then there were these Scrum people came along. No, you cannot do use cases in Scrum. You can in Scrum. You cannot do modeling in Scrum. Like, what do you mean you cannot do? If I want to do it, if it helps me, it works, right? And then we can do that. No, no, no. You have to do this. No, you don't. And it's the um, they always investigate everything to see if you can do it better. That's basically that
Does
is
that
what
mean,
agile is.
and sometimes that means going back to something that be
True.
maybe
That
thrown
also happens.
away.
Oh yes. Yeah.
And like you say, modeling, there was a moment that we might have thought, hey, that's not good. Actually, maybe it's in a different way, but there was some value in it, and
Oh yeah,
that's
for
the thing
sure.
too. And
No, but
and
it's with everything, right? Like people say, yeah, you have to do a retro. No, you don't. If it doesn't add value, stop doing it. If you no, but you have to have sprints. No, you don't. If they don't, if they add value to them to you, fine, right? If they don't, so figure out what happens if you don't have them, right? And investigate it, experiment. That's what it's all about. It's about we are in. If you look at the Cynefin framework, most of us in this industry are in either complex or chaotic zones, mostly complex contexts, which means that the best strategy to do is basically experiment your way out, right? Because there are no necessarily good or best practices. You need to figure out where to go, and it needs to evolve from there, right? And that is what you see in this industry continuously. It's always evolving, meaning if you have a way of working that was invented 25 years ago, it's probably not the best way of working anymore. Some parts might still be valuable, some might not. So figure out how to do this, and don't get stuck on something that you think you need to do because somebody else tells you to.
I really like that, and it reminds me also of a conversation, or I don't know if it was part of a coaching, but I did PSL products. What is it? Problem solving leadership with Jerry Weinberg, and part of that he
Oh,
also gave
cool.
some personal coaching. In the evening, there were some I don't know stories, and one of the things I do remember that he said is like in every relationship, you should, um, at maximum, every 7 years, rethink every agreement you did with your partner.
Yeah,
And he gave examples of with I don't know with that certain
point.
partner. He said he was like 14 years together, and they looked, and they at some point they discussed doing the dishes. And there was a very interesting story because he said, I do the dishes because I hate doing the dishes, and I don't want my partner to do it because it's something horrible. And they talked about it after 14 years of him doing the dishes, and actually she loved doing the dishes, and she let him do the dishes because she thought this is such a wonderful thing.
Oh, I love
and
his
and
work. It's like,
it took them 40 years to figure it out and to actually
cool.
have a conversation about this.
Yeah,
uh,
I
and
quote
that
Weinberg a lot actually. It's like,
yeah, it's so, but he has a really wonderful way for me to take things out of real life and to give it and to turn it into a story, and to, yeah, that's really and I think every one of us, we know, when you talked about, well, okay, this is a relationship of 9 years, your life is completely different now than it was 9 years ago, so of
yeah.
course we have to reinvent some of the things we
This is
have.
this is basically, so this is one of the big arguments I had with the mother of my kids. So we were together for almost 21 years. So that should have been our third cycle, right? And we agreed on stuff in the first year or 2 years of our relationship, right? So when we get to this point, we're going to do it like this and this and this. For instance, when we got kids, we promised in the first or second year, we agreed that we would both take care of the kids evenly, and that meant something like that we could all both work like 3.5 days a week or something. And then when we got to the point years later that we actually got kids, I had a career at a high-end consultancy, and there was it, that didn't fit. Actually, I still did it, but so I still went back to like, people, listen, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to take at least one day a week, take care of my kids. Actually, I went into doing it 2 afternoons in the week because they were in school anyway, and in daycare and stuff. But there was all sorts of like these agreements that we made in the first 2 years that really didn't hold up. And even after 20 years, he said, well, 20 years ago, we agreed to do it like this. I'm like, yeah, but life passes by, right? It's not the same anymore. So yeah, that's one of the bigger issues we always had in that relationship. We still actually have that discussion every now and then. It's like, yeah, but we agreed to do it that way 25 years ago. Yeah, but they're all grown-ups now. Why would we care about whether we give him up an allowance every week, right? It's like, stuff like that.
It's
It's
yeah, it's I recently was advised the book Couples That Work: How to Thrive in Love and at Work, where the author says that and this is where I'm not 100% agreeing, but this author says like it's there is at least three, no, she talks about you only have three major transitions in your life in a partnership, and there's some examples of possible things. Where I disagree is I think there is at least three. There could be more, but I do agree, and basically, and link it again to what Jerry says, like every X time you have to sit down and say, okay, what major event made now changing? Well, for example, if you separate with a partner, you can't work in the same way when you're still living together. That's just that. Yeah, that's if you then you at least have to make changes. But even if you're there, if you get a new big promotion, how do you deal with it? How do you deal? And indeed, getting kids is one of the big things.
well, it's the biggest
Um,
one.
but she also talks about the third one is more like when you retire or when your kids are out of the house, and how do you transition from having a life fully as
I mean,
parents to
I'm in the middle of that actually, and that is why it's also additionally sad that we broke up. We both are in that period of time, right, where the kids are leaving the house and we got more time to ourselves. We were actually settling out to make this work, and that makes this an additionally sad moment to split.
and that book is really about how to get away on these kind of hurdles that
Hmm.
I haven't read that part, so I'm actually
Me
listening to the
neither.
book. So I've only listened to the first two parts about the first two transitions, but that's actually the one that I'm most looking forward to learn. Like, okay,
Yeah.
what does that mean, and how do you, yeah, how do what are the kind of questions that could help us to go into these kind of transitions? We're not that yet there yet because the kids are still living at home, but yeah, it's a very challenging moment. And basically she says that well, the statistics show that this is a big thing that happens when kids go out, that people rethink about what does it mean for our relationship, how do we deal with that, and everything there. It's a very stressy situation for many people.
Yeah.
And we moved again to that very personal topic, but
Yeah.
not.
It's hard to avoid.
I think being in that situation is very logical. Let's move to that next question, which is about remote work. What have you learned about remote work? Well, did you do that for Corona, for example? Did you work remote before?
Before Corona,
Mm-hmm.
not a lot. Yeah, occasionally, but not a lot. It wasn't very normal to do it actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a complex topic, right? It was highly necessary during Corona. There was no other way, basically. But what happened is that a lot of people are now feeling entitled to be allowed to work from home or from whatever, right? Where a lot of companies starting to pull people back into the office simply because and a lot of people then people say, yeah, managers do it because they want to count people, and that's not the reason actually. So I am in the management team, and we had serious discussions about this thing, and it's they want to be have as a company you want to have that people have a sense of belonging, right? It makes them more motivated, makes them more stable, right? So you want to people to belong to something. Also, you want people to work together, and if you're in an office together, you work differently than working remote. And of course, I know the people who love working remote fully say, no, that's not the case. I think it is. I do both. My team works hybrid. Everybody at iWood works hybrid, and we go to the office. So some people actually, my team has sort of like a tiny exception to the rules in the rest of the company. The rest of the company comes to the office on Mondays and Fridays because there's like a weekly cycle in that, which has to do with purchasing and stuff, and that makes sense. And we as tech, we get to the office on Thursdays, and then there's half of the group usually comes in on Mondays, and there's people coming in on Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday as well. I'm at the office quite often because I'm also part of the management team, and there's a few people that show up in the office very regularly, and others don't. Some live farther away, and others live close by. I have one guy on my team who lives in Limburg, so that's totally the opposite side of the country. He comes to the office about once a month, right? And so we do work happily remotely. We do work happily in hybrid situations, basically, because some of us are in the office, some of us are not. But there is one day a week that we are all in the office, which is the Thursday, and we use that day to do typically the discussion thing, right? The brainstorming thing, the design sessions, the talking to the rest of the departments in the company and stuff like that. And for that, it's good to also come to the office. So I'm not against remote work. I don't personally like fully remote work because it gives you no bonding to the company where you work for, and I think that becomes an issue, and it becomes an issue probably in motivation and feeling connected. And so I don't recommend personally fully remote. I wouldn't take jobs that are fully remote because I want to belong. I want to meet people. And so for me, it's that would be a no-brainer, but not doing fully remote work. But I've have worked in hybrid mode since COVID, and I like it a lot. But to be honest, I actually do go to the office quite a lot.
Well, I would add as well is that the so-called fully remote companies, they still try to meet, and then they do something like every 6 months, every year, they bring a lot of people together for a full week and then at the resort or whatever, and they do try to create something. But there is in my well, the way I look at it, there is very limited number of companies, and I think, or maybe none, that be full-time remote and never meet each other. That's just no, like you say, you
Yeah.
need to meet, to learn, to get to know each other, and some things are indeed much better physically when you're together. That's yeah, something that I think it's, yeah, very logical. I do understand a little bit like what you say. I like to work from home. I work on a walking desk, so I like that I can walk much more and move much more at home. In most cases, I have better equipment at home than I have at offices, and in setup and things like that.
Mm.
But talking to people, physically there is nothing that beats that.
No, true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's definitely something that is
yeah.
there. And yeah, I doubt that we'll find it in that kind of way with all the tools. The physically talking to people, it's so much better. um, let's move to that next question
Yeah.
about a book. What's a
Look, yeah.
book that you have read? And I think you that you
I mentioned probably a book by Malcolm Gladwell because so here's the thing. I think I haven't read a complete book from cover to cover in years.
hmm,
Simply because my life doesn't have the time and so the priority to do it. Because there's so much other stuff that I do. I like reading, so I've read tons of books basically, right? And but my life was too full in the last well, well, let's say the last decade, to find the time to read. So that means, in my mind, and having read quite a lot actually, it is um, apparently not the highest priority anymore. And I used to debate that with myself, like, no, no, you've always read and you like reading, and why don't you? And I pick up a book and I read the first 50, 60 pages and I put it down again. And I never ever, I rarely ever finish books. I've read tons of books, right? So but it's
tons of books that you finished at that time.
oh yeah, no. So in the first like 50, probably 50 years of my life, I've read lots of books. And I grew up in. My dad was an avid reader. My dad read everything in the kitchen sink, right? So he was he could quote literary stuff from whatever it comes from, and he started at a young age already influencing me in literature, right? So I've read quite a lot of serious literature before the age of 18 already, and but the last like 10 years I've done so much other stuff in my life, um, traveled a lot, had a really intense relationship. My kids were at ages that I could to take them places, do stuff with them, and that they needed support. My mom is in an elderly home; she has dementia. I have friends. I play indoor soccer or futsal, as they call it these days, and I have a social life, and I like to just sit out on in the sun if there is sun, and then or just travel to places, and that sort of replaced reading books. And it's at first I regretted it because I like no, you should read actually, and then later on I was like, why? What does it matter? Whether I just because other people read doesn't mean I have to read, or um, it's not it used to be much more a mandatory like thing because and then I just stopped doing it, and I still buy books, by the way. That's a stupid thing, right? Actually, because if I and then I start in them and I'm like I'm on a plane. I buy books in the airport quite often, and I'm on a plane and I'm like, yeah, oh, okay, this is a good thing to read, and I never do it. I'll show you. Wait, I'll just pick up the book I bought. And I just bought this book because it's such a beautiful book. And wait, let me put on my reading glasses. I bought this in where did I buy it? In Berlin. It's this book. I'm not sure if I'm. And it's a manga book, so it's like it's comic book basically, but really thick, right? So it's like hundreds of pages, and it's Japanese, so it goes from back to front. So this is the start, and then this is the end of it, right? So it looks so beautiful, and then I just have to buy it, but it's like, and I was like, oh yeah, when we are in the new house, and then I'm going to start reading this thing actually, and I'm going to finish it. Where this is 3 months ago and I haven't started in it yet. Now my life went through a really rough period, right? But or is going through a really rough period. So I have no now I don't have my mind space to read anyway. But it's so yeah, I just stopped reading basically.
But it kind of throws me back to the beginning of our conversation when you said, why are we doing things? And sometimes we do it maybe because of habit and because of it brought you something earlier in your life. And in a way, buying the book still brings you something because you find it
Yep.
beautiful.
Yeah.
But
Right.
maybe I don't need to read it, and or maybe yeah, or I might read the beginning and then stop because I get bored or I get different things. It also reminds me of a quote that I heard Alistair Cockburn say a lot. It's like most books are like at least one third is too big. So most books should be 2/3 of the thing. And the problem is when you read it, you have no idea if the one third is actually in the beginning, in the middle, or in the end.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that
True.
is a kind of a hard thing. Yeah, that's the thing with books. I needed to learn to stop reading. I know a couple of books that I've been trying to read and it didn't work, and I kept and it drains energy. And at some
That's
point, it's
fine,
like,
right?
no, okay, I put it aside, and maybe in a different moment of my life, I might restart, and
Or not,
that
right?
same or not, and that's
Yeah,
okay
that's
as
also fun.
well.
Yeah, right,
It's
exactly. Yeah.
that's something, and indeed, the book that you wanted to bring, or that you proposed, was indeed a book from Malcolm
Malcolm
Gladwell,
Gladwell, yeah.
Blink.
Yeah, I actually very much like his writing style. It's so it's
Hmm.
addictive, basically, and I still haven't finished. I think I started in almost all of his books. I finished one of them, which is I'm not sure if it's here or if in the other. Blink is actually here, but what was the other one? I finished one of them actually. That was quite good. So he has this really grasping way of writing. It's actually there's a I think he has this. I think it's a TED talk or something where he talks about how he writes, and that's as a writer, it's extremely fascinating because it's the process he uses and techniques he uses and how he builds up his story is so much how I would like to write my next book if I ever write a next book. I probably should, but I have no, maybe now I have the time, but I don't want to now. But it's like, and the way he does that it's fascinating. It immediately grasps you into the storyline, and you should probably look it up because it's really fascinating. And so his books, they immediately draw you into it.
I'll add the link to the TED talk or I think I've seen it, but I'll try to find the link. And so, what about Blink that you? Because with all the books that you read from Malcolm, what's the one thing that brought Blink here?
Well, Blink was the one that I was trying to trying to read when you asked the question, basically. So that was a
Mhm.
couple of months ago, and I started in it. I read the first 60 pages, and I still need to finish it. But so the I think the premise of the book is basically that um, quite often making decisions, and if you do that really thoroughly with lots of arguments for and against, are not necessarily better than the decisions you make in the blink of an eye. That's why it's called Blink, basically. And he gives tons of examples, and then he goes into why that could be, and how it could be, and how you could do that, and stuff like that. So it's a fascinating topic because for me, I do lots of things based on my intuition. That usually goes right, and sometimes it doesn't, and then you missed it, and that could also happen. That's almost unavoidable if you make choices. But I make most of my choices based on my intuition. Like that's how I write my code. For instance, I write my code based on my intuition. If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. And I do most of the stuff I do based on intuition. And that's why this book is sort of. I should probably finish it.
But like you say, and I think that's one of the things I like about Gladwell is that there is well, he explains typically one short thing, and then gives example, and there's a lot of theory more around it, but most of the time you grasp the idea in the first few chapters, and everything else is more like why do you for
Yeah,
but
yeah.
and then it's, yeah, sometimes I do remember some of his stories, but in a lot of cases like, okay, this is the thing, you get an idea, and you very quickly, I've read it, and I don't know because I read Blink as well, but years ago, um that or some time ago, I don't know how much time ago, but that what is it, that in a job interview people decide within, what was it, it's seconds, it's like in the first 30 seconds or something, people decide, will I hire this person, yes or no.
Hmm.
And when I read that, it reminded me of an interview I once did in a company. And I do remember that the interviewer was late, and I was like, okay, while waiting, I was, I don't know, fiddling around with my briefcase. And then when he finally arrived, I closed my briefcase and I followed him, but I didn't close it properly. And so while we're moving to the interview place, all my papers were all
Oh
around the
god,
place.
terrible.
And I do remember still that first moment, that first talk, it's like, okay, I can just as well go home because it doesn't matter anymore. His decision is taken that I'm bad,
Yeah,
and yeah,
sloppy.
it
Yeah,
didn't feel like a good interview, and it was actually because I was waiting for that person again. Not important, but it really, I realized like immediately, like, yeah, it doesn't matter what I will do, that decision is already taken. And I feel that in a lot of things, like in a blink of an eye we take decisions. Yeah, there's of course always that what is it, the first brain and the second brain, so the two parts of our brain that we have that work in a different kind of way. But a lot of our big decisions, even if we have all the rationality to explain why I don't know, buy this house or whatever, is very emotional and very quick decided.
ah, yeah.
It's and yeah, that's and again, this is indeed a book where it explains a lot of that.
Yeah, it does.
And I like how you link it to what a lot of what you do. Let's move to that next question. What's a question that you think I should also ask you, and what is the answer?
I don't know, actually. I I thought about it, but I just don't know. It's no, I don't know. I think the questions that we went through are basically the main questions in who I am and what I do. So it's fairly complete, I would say.
Is there yeah, because I think we moved in all kind of directions,
Yeah, we did.
and I think it's is there something that what I don't know with other interviews or other thing when you talk you talked about earlier about how with your children and some of these things, what is something that maybe you want to give to them, or that you what's a kind of advice or something else?
Oh. No, I tend to give them some advice. Usually they don't like my advice because they're very stubborn, just like me, right? It runs in the family.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And maybe that's the advice. You just do what you want to do, because that's also what I'm hearing with a lot
that
of
no,
the
yeah,
questions.
that's basically what I try to teach them is find your passion, right? It's like and live for it. And so I try to give them some understanding of well, people I would say, but also so like music and art and movies and all that stuff, but also to um, to always be yourself and always don't forget to make decisions also based on what you actually feel and want and to do and etc etc, not always just on what you think is expected from you. A lot of people do that way too much, actually.
I think that's it's it's hard as a kind of advice to give you to your children in a way, I think, because
It is.
if they do it, they don't follow the advice, and if if they do follow it, it's like they
Yeah,
still listen to you, so it's kind of hard as a kind of tip to give. But yeah, it's I think it's indeed we live into a world that adds so much expectations to on people, like this is the way to lead your life, and this is and then the books tell you this or that, and yeah, it's
yeah. Find your own way. That's basically the important thing.
I think that I like that as an idea, as yeah, as kind of way to a mantra, I would almost say,
Yeah.
in life. So let's move to, well, already the last question. What is who do you think I should ask next, and who is a person that you think I should also invite here?
Yeah. So my originally thought was Alan Holub. And
Hmm.
have you met Alan or do you know him?
I do know Alan. I do know Alan. He's quite a character, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely with strong opinions,
Very strong.
um, which
Al-
sometimes I agree and sometimes I disagree. But that's the case, I think, with always when people have strong opinions.
yeah. So
Um,
Alan is he's a good friend of mine. And we don't see him too much because he's on the other side of the ocean, right? And so we'll probably meet up in London in May again. And I always love meeting him. He's very grumpy, of course, right? And he is very um, well, very opinionated, and but he usually has very good reasons for it. And but he can be a bit too grumpy about it sometimes. But if you look through that, he's just a really sweet, nice gentleman, and that who has like who finds it hard sometimes to cope with the world, basically. And don't tell him that I said that, but it's like
on camera now, so if he
yeah,
watches,
yeah,
he
yeah.
will.
No, yeah, no, I
But
love him to death. Actually, it's like
but I
yeah,
think he in a way he might know that as well. I mean, once you get again, he's not 20 anymore.
no,
I think by the time people are more or less our age or older, most people realize their quirkiness in how we are, I would think.
Yeah,
Um,
but he's a great guy anyway, so I like him a lot. So it's I love him, but he's so he has very strong opinions on a lot of things, and when it comes to agile, he has very strong opinions. I usually agree with him. So that's the thing. I think he's now, but I'm getting a little bit too stuck in all these scrummish things, and I think he probably should let go of that. But yeah, he's a sweet guy struggling basically.
yeah, and I think again related to or linked to what we all started out in the beginning, he's definitely fighting is maybe too strong a word, but really making sure that people see like, okay, that one way of working is definitely not a good thing. He's whenever people are very strict in way of looking at the world, he will definitely call people out on that. I
Oh
would
yeah,
say not afraid of that.
no,
And that's, I think, in a way we need a lot of that because like you said in the beginning, we have way too many scrum polices for in all kind of ways, and we just picked out on scrum, but we can probably say the same thing about kanban or any other framework. And yeah,
it's
it's
any let's call it paradigm, any paradigm or any, well, let's call it framework or whatever, right? Has these people, right? It's every one of these communities has the people that tend to get almost religious on it. Scrum has a lot of them, but because, and the reason for that is that Scrum became so popular that it was like a way to make a living for a lot of people who otherwise would have never been in this industry. And that made it stronger, that kind of religious thinking. But you see it in other communities as well, right? If you look into the DDD community, for instance, totally unrelated to anything agile, but they also have this like um, they can be a little bit elitist, basically, and you see that also in like the Kanban and Flow people, is they have this sort of like intellectual. Um, they're like the intellectual variant of agile, basically, and but and you see it in most communities, right? So go talk to people about functional programming. It's like if you get to the core people of that, although it's a small group, it's they're all also like tough people, right? But every community has that. The only problem with Scrum is it got too big, so it attracted a lot of people to my industry, the industry of software, that otherwise wouldn't have entered that, and they would have stayed in wherever they were. But because there was so much work in there, they all started doing this certification, and then with no prior knowledge of how the world of software actually works, were placed in roles that they were supposed to sort of like manage that, and that didn't really work out well, and that made so much miserable stuff. That's like it's the process people.
certification doesn't help in that way because of
No.
course people are certified to know it correctly and they're trained to know it correctly, and then when you use the different, I do remember at some point I was interested not becoming a scrum trainer because I didn't want to do all the training all the time, but I at some point someone convinced me like, okay, maybe you should try to be a scrum coach. And when I applied for it, I was almost beaten up because I used iterations instead of sprint in one of my documents and was like, yeah, you're right. I understand that it's if I want to have that title, I should use the right word. But from that being okay, it's totally bullshit, whatever else you wrote, it's like, okay, then I'm no longer interested. Like
Makes
that's
sense.
not, yeah, that's not the kind of stamp I wanted at that
No,
moment.
of course not.
And that's a little bit that like you say, it became too big and it became too important to then have that stamp and use it. And I do understand in a way that when things become big, you have to kind of protect it that people understand it, so that like you said, there's a lot of people coming in with no knowledge about agile or IT in or creating software whatsoever. So that we have to kind of protect it, that they at least understand the part that we're certifying them in, but that it backfired in so many different ways. Yeah, it's hard. At the same time, I do sometimes have the feeling, like for example in XP, that community never grew that big. It
Doesn't exist
also,
actually. There's no
well,
XP community. Because
for me, that's a little bit what I wanted to say, and there might be part because they didn't protect it as well. I think
no,
what was originally XP was much more like we keep improving and improving and improving, and whatever we now call XP is totally different when it was originally. But because of that, there is also no community anymore, and that's also sad. So I see,
they
yeah.
never. I think they never settled to be a community, right? They didn't aim for it. It's like there wasn't never the goal.
Well, there was. I think it was an interview or something I wrote or a conversation I heard with Ken Beck where he said like, I didn't want to be the front person.
They didn't know.
Yeah, like they have in Scrum. There's actually a couple of people say, "Hey, I put a stake in the ground. This is what Scrum is, and that's it, and that's how I define it by writing that Scrum guide with Kanban. We have a couple of others doing something very similar, and that helped to create that community. But at the same time, it creates also some negative parts. So yeah,
I have the Kanban, the David Anderson Kanban book is on my desk actually at iBoot.
Mhm.
And the reason for it is that my monitor otherwise isn't high enough. Actually, it's like it's literally
I
the only
used
reason it's there, right?
I used to have the what was it, Microsoft project book that helped me in the very same way for a long time because these are thick books and they
Yeah, that's
helped
what it's
it.
good for.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's yeah. Although again, I did learn some things from the book that you talked about from David as well. But like with what we said earlier on books, it's learning something and then improving and moving on and taking from all these books behind me and from all the books that you read or parts of the books that you read, we take ideas and we mingle them into something that is our own thing. And that is different from the thing that we did 10 years ago and is different from the thing that we'll do in 10 years from now.
Exactly.
That feels a lot like that. Well, Sander, I really want to thank you for your time. It's been a wonderful conversation, going back and forth into very detailed and different kind of ways. I really enjoyed it. If people want to connect with you, what's a good way to connect with you?
So the easiest thing is LinkedIn. So I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, right? So there's very
That
much
should
no
be the
other.
link, if I'm correct.
Probably, yeah.
It should be because I copied it, but okay,
Yeah.
open it.
Yeah. So I stopped using most of the other social media. Of course, I have an Instagram account, but that's mostly for the photographs I take and for my kids and stuff. But so I do love photography as well. But so the LinkedIn is the primary way. It's easy to connect, right? And it's it's actually got tons of invitations this week because of the students in Antwerp, which is cool.
Right.
And otherwise, they can also drop me an email. My email is easy to find. It's on my website. My website is just www.sanderhoogendoorn.com. Easy to find.
This should be the website.
That is the website, exactly.
And there people can find indeed
Yeah.
everything else. I don't want to put an email address into, well, in these days
It's there.
it's there. People can find it if they
Yeah.
want to do it. So really wonderful conversations we had, really wonderful evening. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Yves.
Yep.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.